Hey, you guys, this is Josh with Homesteading Family, and welcome to this week's episode of the Pantry Chat Food for Thought. Today, we're going to be talking about something that Carolyn and I are passionate about. No surprise, we're going to be talking about coffee. Carolyn and I absolutely love coffee. We love quality coffee. And we used to love roasting our own coffee, but that became a challenge with such a big family of coffee drinkers now that the kids are older. All that aside, though, we're going to sit down today and talk to a couple of friends, Graysen and Nicholas, who are local here, and talk about sourcing, roasting, and just all things coffee. It is going to be a fun discussion, and look forward to bringing them on in just a minute. First, though, I got to say thank you to our sponsors for helping bring this episode to you today. And today, our sponsor is Azure Standard. Now, as many of you know, Carolyn and I have been buying bulk goods from Azure for nearly 20 years. And it's always a big, exciting day when it's Azure Pickup Day. Now, for those of you who don't know how Azure works, they offer weekly, every other week, or monthly deliveries. All the ordering and purchasing is done online, kind of similar to Amazon. And then everything is packed up and shipped to your drop point in a temperature controlled truck. So unlike Amazon, it doesn't come to your door. Unlike Amazon, it's not a lot of cheap foreign goods. They're good quality, mostly foodstuffs, but things that you may need as a homesteader. If we can't grow it or make it, we're usually going to Azure first. And then they deliver to our community. It's a bulk delivery at a common drop. And, that makes it less expensive and makes it a community event as well. So the drop location we use is actually closer to us than the nearest grocery store, which makes it really convenient. In our small town alone, there's over 5 different drop locations to choose from. So Azure is very accessible. Last I checked, they've got drop points in every state, even Hawaii and Alaska, and they're even moving up into Canada. I know there's a bunch of you here from Canada, and we're thankful for you guys. Now, if you can't find a drop location near you, there's even an option to start your own, which we even did at one point. So I want you to check out Azure. We'll leave you a link in the description below to check out their drop locations, their store, and they're also offering those of you who have never bought from Azure before 15% off your first order of $100 or more. So go check them out at www.Azure Standard, that's AZURESTANDARD.com, and find your way to the drop point locator. You can see if they're near you, and you go from there. All right. Thanks, Azure. Love you guys. So thankful for the collaboration and the support of the Pantry Chat podcast. And next, I want to tell you about our friends, Graysen and Nicholas. Now, after migrating their families from opposite ends of the continent, they ended up here in North Idaho, and they found themselves meeting at church in a small town here locally. This is where a friendship developed between these guys, upon which they have placed their business. Through their shared faith in Jesus, the two of them started, and I would add, and their love for coffee, the two of them started Lore Coffee Roasters to provide for their families and glorify God in all things. Nicholas and Graysen came up with the idea of combining their talents and ambitions to bring uniquely tasting coffees to the panhandle of Idaho and beyond. So let's welcome Graysen and Nicholas.
You guys know Carolyn and I love coffee, but you guys are passionate about coffee, not just consuming it, but roasting it, bringing amazing flavor to the world, as well as good quality. How'd you guys get started? What's your journey into coffee?
Well, I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee, and in college I started working as a barista at a specialty coffee roastery and cafe, just outside of my campus. And at first it was just a job, and then started getting more and more interested in how to make the best cup of coffee I could, and learn how to, dial in espresso, make latte art, pour overs, learning how to extract coffee effectively, learning about ratios, et cetera, et cetera. I got really nerdy in it with a couple of friends of mine, and it kind of paid my way through most of college. Nice. And then I started working my way up as management at a cafe. And just right around that time, my wife and I decided to move up here to North Idaho. And within about 6 to 9 months of that really long journey, pulling our kids along in the process, my wife was pregnant too, we decided we wanted to start a roasting business, and with the focus on selling coffee online and distributing it around the country. And I knew that was going to be a really tough job, but I knew that I wanted to focus on roasting coffee and really developing the coffee program. But I knew I needed help. And so, after 6 to 9 months or so, in the community and at our church, I became good friends with Graysen and his wife, Rachel. And, I saw a lot in him and said, you know what, he could be the other half of the business and take care of things that I'm not very good at. And we could hopefully synthesize and make a business and a product that is excellent coffee, and share it with people that we love and people that have similar interests and values that we do.
Yeah.
And, that's kind of how the ball got rolling.
So are you, from your perspective, is coffee roasting more art or more science?
The truth is it's both. And I'd say it's more science. We measure everything when it comes to roasting the coffee. Before we even bring a coffee into roast, we're getting a couple dozen little 100 grams packets of various coffees that we're interested in as samples. We sample roast it.
So it's not just about roasting, it's about sourcing.
Sourcing is first. Yeah. And after we taste, say a dozen or 2 dozen different coffees, and we pick 2 or 3 that we say, okay, we want to buy this coffee. Mm-hmm. We want to profile it in the roast, and then share it with people. It goes through a rigorous process, and then once we bring it on, then we're throwing it in the machine, and we're measuring we want to measure the time that we start to the end, the total time roast, and then get really nerdy in there, time after the beans start cracking. In temperature, things like that. And we have a graph on our computer screen that we're following all the temperature in real time. So it's not very artistic, that part of it. The art, I think, comes in when after that moment of first crack. It's really important in specialty coffee, is this moment of crack, when the beans burst open. And now I only have a minute or 2 to finish the roast, without ruining the coffee and it tasting excellent. And this is when the coffee can go off the walls. This is the most unpredictable time of the coffee's process in the roasting machine. So this is
also the most fun too.
Yeah. And let's get into that in a couple of minutes. We'll get into the process a little bit more. But that really helps. And you were just talking, and I was like figuring you were more artist, but then you got into the details. Like, this is pretty scientific actually. And I've roasted at home. I'd say that's probably a little more art, because you don't have the technicality of everything, and we'll get into that in a minute. But I want to hear how do you come into the story here, both far as coffee and then partnering up with this guy?
Sure.
Here.
It's actually a really funny story. My wife and I were not coffee people when we first met Nicholas, which is very, very funny. So essentially he broached me with the idea. He said, I want to roast and ship coffee. And that's my focus. I've been in coffee for so long. I've been in specialty coffee, which is something I had no knowledge of at that time. Mm-hmm. And I said, okay, I'll try it. I like the idea. A little bit about my background. I come from more computer science, geospatial science. I helped a lot with engineering tasks when it comes to commercial buildings, aircraft hangars, dams and waterways and things like that, growing up in Alaska. And so that's kind of my background. So it has nothing to do necessarily with roasting coffee or even preparing coffee, but dealing heavily with systems, people, integrations, management, that sort of thing. Right. So I said, okay, I got to try it, at least just to try it. I just want, before we even entertain it any further. So I think I could pin down exactly which coffee it was.
He had no idea what he was in for.
No idea.
I did, because until
I
you
was
had
like,
special
okay, I know what coffee is. It tastes kind of, burn and weird. And, people put lots of like milk and stuff in it and creams and sugars and whatnot.
Oh, Folgers, you got to bury it with something.
I know. He was like, okay, here is just black coffee. And I just want you to taste it. And I believe it was like Luis Calderon from Colombia. And it tasted like a sweet cherry kind of a candy syrup just by itself. And I was like, okay,
Wow.
What did you put in that?
What'd you do?
Yeah. I said,
What are you pulling over on me?
This is how it is. This is how it's processed. And this is what the farmer does to make it just like this. And you don't have to add anything to it. It's just how it is. And it was at that moment where I kind of became a coffee person. And I said, okay, this type of coffee, I'm sold on. Absolutely. If I can have this, if I'm going to drink coffee and become, have that be a really important part of my life, I want it to be something that actually tastes really good, is exciting. And that wasn't only it. There were so many different, I mean, how many did you have? Like 40 different samples just to start with?
Yeah.
From all different places all over the place. And the flavor profiles were incredibly different. And that was something that I saw it in a way that the art and the science could synthesize very well in that kind of arrangement.
Yeah.
So we decided to go for it, and we placed an order on this guy right here.
So you're the roaster, and your kind of business systems.
Yeah.
Putting that all together.
There's a lot that goes into the sourcing, the management, the roasting, and all that, of the whole approach that we have that Nicholas is spearheading towards the coffee. And then there's a lot of the boring stuff, or I guess let's say less exciting stuff when it comes to paperwork, compliance, shipping, packaging, that kind of stuff. So that's where that's my focus.
He does most,
especially on the website. Oh yeah. You could always change something about a website, and there's all like never ending work to do.
You can always tinker. I'm a tinkerer.
I know.
I like to tweak, and
I'm always up late.
You're probably a tinkerer too, because you're probably tinkering with the coffees and the roasts and everything. Yeah. Well, I got to say, you're talking about your first cup. This is my first cup of drip with you guys. I've had your espresso many times. And of course, we're going to talk about a special blend here, but I don't drink a whole lot of drip. This is phenomenally good.
Thank you.
And when I do drink drip, it's usually buried in some good cream and sugar, and this is excellent. I'm not good at describing things, but it is, it's thicker than most coffee. Or at least it feels thicker.
Why that is?
Palate.
Because we weigh the coffee. We weigh the coffee, and we also weigh how much water we're putting into it. So the
really simple ratio.
Yeah, it's basically a 1:16 ratio. For every gram of coffee, there's 16 grams of water, and that's gonna. And then we tweak the grind setting, and the end result is going to be a fully developed and fully extracted coffee that not only is full of caffeine, but it tastes how the coffee should taste.
So I'm seeing 3 elements so far that go into good coffee. There's sourcing, there's roasting, and then there's brewing.
Yeah.
And of course, when I say coffee, I'm kind of a catch-all for drip, pour over, espresso, any of them, right? But those are 3 key components.
Yep.
Is that it? Is that the 3-legged stool that makes an amazing cup of coffee?
There's 3 phases of making coffee, and they're all very important. There's intermediate phases too, shipping, but packaging,
care of it, and everything along the way. Yeah.
But sourcing excellent green coffee, unroasted, and then figuring out how to roast that coffee. This is the art part, where we're trying to find that window of combination of temperature and time in the roast that is going to best showcase the inherent qualities of whatever coffee we're roasting. After we give it a little time to age, coffee's off gassing as soon as the crack starts, and then for until it's stale. So, but when we're talking taste, we're looking at 3 days minimum, a week or 2. The lighter roast it is, the longer you need to let it off gas before it's going to taste how you want it to. But then it's brewing the coffee and really taking into consideration, like we were saying, the ratio and grind setting.
Yeah.
No matter how you're brewing it.
Let's talk about stage 1, which is sourcing the coffee. What's what's important about sourcing good coffee? What are the pitfalls? I mean, I know I have some things as a consumer I'm concerned about, and I'll bring those up in a minute once you guys get through the basic. But just like, how do you approach sourcing and bringing good coffee to market?
That's a good question.
The most important thing is, having a good, I mean, the truth is a middleman to get to the green coffee, a trusted middleman, a supplier that has proven themselves to us to that they source excellent coffee
with long-standing relationships with that farmer.
As we grow, hopefully we get to meet farmers and get to have that one-on-one experience, but we're not there yet. So we have a few really trusted suppliers of, commercial quantity, specialty grade coffee.
So when you say trusted, what is it that you need to know? What are you trusting them with? What are the things you're looking for?
The main, because we cut our teeth in specialty coffee, number one thing is taste. But before we get to taste, we want to make sure the coffee is clean and is going to pass the testing that we put the coffee through. And we send it off to a lab. We want to make sure there's, no mold whatsoever, and glyphosates and any other mycotoxins that's in the testing suite. We want to be confident that it's going to pass the test before we buy it. But fortunately for us, because of our suppliers, they're 100% rate for us so far. So fortunately, we don't have to worry about that part too much, which then leads it to the fun component for Graysen and I, which comes down to taste. What kind of coffees do we want to offer people? What do we think people will like? How do we want to try to expand people's palates? Do we want to give them something that they're going to be comfortable with? The answer is yes to all that. But so it's a process for us. It's vigorous, and
it never ends.
Yeah, I think we're constantly doing it.
Sure. Yeah, I'd imagine it's just going to be an ongoing refinement. But what about like how it's grown? So I get the molds, right? And you guys know, Carolyn and I have been through, and everybody here listening, or most people, unless you're new, we've been through a health journey and some testing where we both discovered a lot of molds in our system. And there were a few different things. I've got some construction background. I had molds from that. But we had molds that were very much associated with coffee.
Interesting.
And so I think that's an issue that people don't really know about. Molds are hard on your system, and that can be a real issue with coffee.
Totally. I'm glad you identified that. And a lot of the attributes that we look for when we're even like beginning to work with maybe even a new farmer or anything like that is what's their history with the product, how long they've been in the business, what's the farm look like, specifically with altitude, geolocation, and things like that. What's their I guess what's kind of the ecosystem around it already, that sort of thing, which is indicative of very healthy, happy plants. And then a lot of that stuff also is how they're processing it appropriately. A lot of coffee is processed. Well, all coffee has to get processed in order for it to be available to be dried, for us to be roasted. However, there is a lot of stages and parts and pieces in that process where it could go wrong, and you could have molds be introduced, and you could have yeasts and things like that growing and stuff like that. So that is, I'm glad you brought that up. And a lot of that stuff does come from coffee. And a lot of that mold that comes from coffee is typically due to mishandling and things like that too.
I'd say mishandling is the only opportunity for us to get a coffee that has some mold on it. Because coffee that's grown, one of the components to growing good coffee that's often forgotten is not just elevation, but it's the terrain, and it's the slope of the hillside that the coffee's on.
Interesting. Okay.
So one of the things that's synonymous with excellent specialty grade coffee is its high elevation. And then when you see pictures and videos of the farm, I don't know how the farmers pick the coffee, because it's like very steep. And what the steepness does, and the space between the rows of the coffee plants allows for, is airflow,
air movement.
And so
lots of it.
when you're buying high grade stuff, because it's grown at such elevation and the slope is steep and there's room for the air to move throughout the whole plant, there's almost no opportunity for coffee to have mold grow on it there
Right.
at the farm.
Yeah, totally.
So then the only potential problem is if when they processed it, did they make a mistake? And then let's say they didn't make a mistake, then how do they store it, and then how long was it sitting,
Yeah.
in transit, et cetera, So the processing part, this is kind of a nerdy thing, traditional coffee processing at the farm starts with, there's wash process, there's honey process, there's natural processing, and then there's all these in-betweens and extended versions of them to try to pull out as much flavor as possible. But basically a wash process, we're looking at what they call a wet process. You take the seed out of the cherry, you then throw all these seeds into depending on how they have it set up, like a vat with a drain underneath it, and you're spraying it with water, or you're soaking it in water.
Okay.
So it just cleans everything off. So there's no mucilage, and there's nothing left of that plant other than the seed itself,
Right.
and then the encasing that it's in. So then there's less moisture left on the coffee at that point. So then when it's dried, it's going to produce something that's really, really clean. And there's less room for possible, mistakes. And then you have a natural process. You leave the seed in the cherry, and when you leave the seed in the cherry, you have to be very precise with how you handle it from that point on, because it's just encased in fruit, right?
Right. So that's going
it's wet.
It's wet. It's going to start to decay, rot. The general word is going to start to decay, which that's going to have fungus and mold or something kind of inherently.
Yep. Yeah. The good farms, they have gentlemen or women raking those cherries
Constantly,
multiple times a day,
so
that it allows for the airflow that's necessary to keep it clean. Because natural coffee done right is excellent. It's just, if it's not done right, then there's a greater chance of something bad developing.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, it's kind of a dual reason to move it. So it's also drying evenly, but at the same time also less of an opportunity to have an environment for anything to be exposed to fruit.
Yeah.
Out of that. Yeah, for sure.
What about, so we talked about mold, but what about contaminants? My understanding is that coffee, the industrial coffee, system, where they're growing on an industrial scale, like any crop, which is most of what you're going to get, in the store. And I'd assume probably even a lot of small label, stuff that's not been chosen well.
Any gas station you go into, for sure. Yeah.
Right. But that's pretty laden with herbicides, pesticides.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the only ways that they can reliably get a certain, just like you're looking at your farm almost on a spreadsheet at that point. It's so big, and you can only have a certain allotment of loss or anything like that. And so they have to spray. They do, like when I was talking about earlier, I don't know if it was in the outtakes, but mass farming in large plots of land that are flat but also tenable to grow coffee. That's when they spray with the herbicides.
And they're having to do that because they're sending it. Generally, those big farms, they're sending it to big corporations.
Right.
And those big corporations need a lot of coffee, and none of their processes are as detailed as like a small roastery is going to be anyways.
Or a small producer.
Yeah.
Well, and this is an important junction point, because a lot of our listeners, followers, we're talking homesteading, we're talking DIY, do things ourselves. We're trying to grow a lot ourselves because we don't want the industrialized process. We don't want to be dependent on it. We don't want what's in it. Right. And so we want to know where our food's coming from. So we want to grow it ourselves, or, source it more and more locally as we can. Coffee, that's obviously for most of us a bit harder to do.
Yeah, I was going to say, you have to be a really big greenhouse.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it's happening here in North Idaho.
Yeah.
And at least not on any realistic scale. Maybe a little greenhouse, we can get ourselves a couple cups every year.
That'd be fun.
I would experiment.
That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be fun. But the reality is we can't really DIY that part. We need guys like you that are giving us an alternative to the mega system. And this has become big for me, especially in the health journey we're on, realizing how bad coffee can be when it's industrially grown and we don't have anybody, You guys familiar with Joel Salatin?
Yes.
And of course, he has a model like, you know, come 24/7. You can walk on his farm anytime. And it's all about trust. It's all about saying, you know, come and see.
Yeah.
We can't do that with coffee generally.
True.
And
That's actually very funny because our cafe is tangential with an open wall to our
well, it's
entire
really
roasting
nice.
operation.
Yeah. So you can hear, at least on this end, see, you
Mhm.
guys can't see it, but we're sitting in the roasting side, but this is actually roastery and coffee house out over there. So when people come in, they get the whole experience.
Totally.
You're opening them up to the roaster, and they can see your bags and your labels. And
Oh yeah.
USD or organic right here, and all certifications you guys have. And of course, that's going to build trust. But I mean, for you guys, my point is right, we're just not going to, most of us aren't just going to go out and grow coffee. We're going to have to source it from somebody that cares about sourcing it.
Yeah.
And
Homesteaders should source their coffee from homesteaders who grew the coffee. We're not homesteaders,
right,
but we buy all of our green coffee from essentially homesteaders. We're talking
right. Small,
scale
Mhm.
farms where they also grow bananas and other fruits
right.
that their family live off of. You know, these people, you know, and whether it be Colombia, Ecuador, Guatemala, Honduras, Ethiopia, Kenya, these are the coffee that we're getting. These people, it's like their whole life, you know, is growing coffee. It's incorporated,
And they love it, and they do really well.
Well, and there are people like us, right? An acre, 5 acres. So where I've seen this is in Burundi, Africa.
Yeah,
I've done some mission work in Burundi, Africa, in the highlands, and there's a lot of coffee grown there on the steep hillsides.
Mhm.
And so we learned a little bit about how that system worked. And for me, this was back in 2016 or so. That was eye-opening to realize, like, this isn't a giant plantation. These are all, there's a half acre here, there's 3 acres over there. And of course, you know, they're all growing their coffee and taking it to the
mill.
The mill, basically, right?
Yep.
And so I think that's well said. You know, ultimately we want to buy it at from that scale.
Yeah.
And guys like you are helping, you know, collectively bring, you know, that scale to us. That's really cool.
It just so happens that small scale growing processes and these small farms generate the best tasting coffee.
They do.
You know, it's really this awesome system where
just like our small farms are growing generating the best tasting tomato, right?
Absolutely,
or the best beef or raw milk or whatever. Yeah.
My wife's tomatoes taste better than the tomatoes I can get from the grocery store.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I'm not just saying it.
When we had the dinner over at your house last summer, it was the best food I've ever had, and it was all as local as possible.
Yeah,
it was delicious.
Yeah, that was an amazing. There's quite a few people watching here probably that came to that dinner.
Yeah,
so.
for sure, absolutely.
Yeah, and you guys are going to be back this year, right?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, providing the beverages.
Absolutely.
Cool. Got it locked down. That's good. All right. Well, we got a bit to cover, so a little bit on sourcing here. We can probably talk all day just on sourcing. But so next stage in a good cup of coffee is roasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got a lot of DIY people here. I've roasted myself, and it's doable, but it's challenging, it's time consuming, and it's hard to replicate. So I can talk about that for a minute, but I'd love to hear from you guys. You know, for most of us, roasting coffee regularly, if we've got any kind of household that drinks very much coffee, it's kind of hard to do at home consistently all the time. We got to pick and choose our battles as homesteaders. What do we do ourselves? What do we produce? And, you know, I did it for a long time, but then kids got older, they started drinking coffee, and it was like, I can't keep up with this. So I'm going to find, thankfully, somebody like you. I've been having to buy online. I'm excited now that we're working together. But what goes into roasting a good cup of coffee?
Good question.
It's a complicated question.
It seems so easy of a question to answer, but it's also very complicated.
Well, just like highlight, like, you know, we probably don't need to go through every detail, but like highlight what are some of the things that are really important.
So there's a few. I mentioned one of these phases. There's 3 phases that the coffee is going through in the roasting machine, whatever roasting machine it is, whether it's a skillet at your house or something like this. There's the initial phase, which is just known as the drying phase. Mm-hmm. So you put the coffee into a hot environment, preferably sealed and controlled, and then with a lot of movement and a healthy amount of airflow. And what's happening is that the coffee reaches our floor somewhere between 9 and 11% moisture content, which is good for flavor and the lack of mold. It's just excellent coffee if it's in that range. And then the first phase, as I mentioned, is actually the longest phase, probably about half of the entire roast. It's in the drying phase, and all that's happening in the machine is the moisture is leaving. It's going out the exhaust until we reach a point where the first chemical reaction takes place. The Maillard reactions. You've all experienced a Maillard reaction if you've ever cooked steak or chicken, anything. When you sear a steak and you start to get that crispy
That's
side.
that caramelization
Yeah.
we would talk about. Have you ever read the book Steak?
I've not read that book.
Are you a steak lover?
I like
Yeah.
steak.
Read the book Steak. Just that simple. Steak.
Yeah.
Anyways, goes into these details and a lot of other things. But okay, so
Absolutely.
the Myers reaction, yeah,
The Maillard reaction,
yeah.
that's when caramelization starts.
Yeah.
And it's just, the next phase is the yellowing phase. So as soon as you see yellow or brown, just or the lack of green, we have a little hole that we can see with the beans moving around, we'll mark that point. And so that's the point that the drying phase has ended, and now we're into the chemical changing phase.
So the moisture is all out
Moisture's
at that
gone.
point. That's what you're looking for. That's the first
Yeah.
phase. Is like you're
Yeah.
just extracting the moisture.
Yeah.
I assume not doing it too quickly. but
You
that
want
would-
to draw it out.
Yeah.
It's also, you can't really force it out unless there's a small, really tiny amount of coffee.
Okay.
So if you're doing a pound at home, it's going to be hard. It's going to take a while. If you're doing 15 to 20 pounds here, it's going to take a while. But you do need enough energy. You don't want to draw it too long. You want to reach the caramelizing phase at a healthy point.
Mhm.
But then from that point until the next phase, you have this yellowing, and then towards the end of the yellowing, it's browning. And that is when we're going to be really starting to control and adjust our gas setting, our heat settings. And then the next point of change is what I said earlier, first crack, or for us, generally it's just crack. We don't take it to a second crack.
Mhm.
But the first crack is going to happen in.
Well, what's happening right there?
Right.
I know a little bit
Okay.
about first crack
Right.
because
First-
I've roasted, in the skillet, but a lot of people aren't going to know, what you mean by first crack. What's happening?
So not only was the coffee drying and then yellowing and browning, there's all of this pressure being built up in the beans themselves. And so it's going to reach a point where the coffee bean or seed can't handle the pressure anymore, and it's going to burst open. And that explosion is really the first moment of off gassing. It's internal mostly CO2 is just now it's releasing.
Mhm.
And similar to popcorn, it just makes a loud crack sound.
It's like a crack or a snap.
Right. What happens if you stop before first crack as far as quality of the coffee and you leave that? It's obviously air and some different gases in there.
It's gonna be really hard to grind that coffee.
Yeah.
You're gonna need a $4,000 grinder to get that to a point where you can extract anything out.
Oh,
of it.
okay. All right.
We also want to, solubility is important when roasting
Absolutely.
and brewing. It's gonna taste really nutty. It's gonna taste grassy potentially, and
We want grass-fed beef, not grass-fed coffee.
No,
beans.
Right, okay.
This is actually
Got
what's
that.
known as this. You raise a good thing to address white coffee. Have you ever heard of white?
Oh yeah, I have not tried it. I mean, it seems like they're always coming up with a new gimmick.
That is white coffee.
It's a gimmick.
And it
There
is
you
a
go.
gimmick.
Okay, we learned
Well,
something good today.
White coffee is just under roasted coffee. They
Right.
don't reach crack. It's about 2/3 to 3/4 of a true roast. They don't reach crack because I think there's more caffeine in it. It's not exactly true, but when we get to that moment of crack, this is when all the fun kind of happens, and when we really got to buckle down and laser focus, because until you have a profile set, you don't know what's going to happen. So the first 1 to 3 batches of a new coffee, I have no idea how it's going to handle crack and onward. Unless it's totally new, I probably have a background of roasting similar coffees, so I have an idea.
So every batch, like when you buy you're going to buy a certain bulk of a certain coffee.
Yeah.
So every one, when you do that, even if it's from the same plantation, same
plant,
variety, it's still going to behave a little bit differently when you get it in there.
Yeah, crop, like year to year.
Yeah,
If it's last year's
okay.
crop to this year's crop, it's still a different coffee.
That's where the art comes in a little bit. I think. So you
That's-
can't
yeah.
just take your scientific chemistry chart.
Yeah.
You guys chart all this, I know, but there is,
There's
there's
feel
no
and,
copy
and
paste.
anticipation.
yeah. Yeah, I'm feeling the drama start to build up.
It's one of the hard parts about having, no wall separating us is, dialing in a new coffee, and you never know who's going to yell at you or ask a question. Well, I'll have headphones on when I'm dialing in the coffee, put it that way, so I can focus.
Don't mess
Don't
with
mess with
Nicholas when first crack is coming.
No,
All right.
Yeah. And we want to have a smooth finish after crack for a light roast, really special coffee. We're looking at somewhere between a minute and a minute 10 after that first crack.
Okay.
Short. We want to give it enough so there's no grassy flavors, but we don't want to take it past a point where the caramelization starts manipulating the natural flavors there. And that's Nordic roasting. Nordic roasting, first it's sourcing coffee worthy of roasting it like this.
Mhm.
So it has excellent qualities that are really special, unique, exotic, floral, fruity, chocolatey. And we want to find that point where it's maximized.
Okay.
And that's where you have the time and temperature and crack, time after crack, all this big giant ratio that we're trying to work out to get to that point. If we wanted to take it longer, as we do with our flagship flagship coffee, the Bridge, which is a blend of Peru and a Costa Rican coffee, really excellent. We want to give it a little more development after that crack. So that it's more soluble, and so that it has more caramelization, more chocolate, heavier tones, and more body, because that coffee is going to be good black, but we want it to be versatile. So if you were to brew a pot of it at your house, if you want it black, that's great. But if your son wants the cream in it, it's still going to taste good. And the same thing keeps going.
So talk a little bit. Most people are going to know light, medium, dark. So you haven't brought in that language yet to the roasting process. Help us sift through that to think about that, because usually if you're out buying coffee, I don't know how you guys label it. We've got one right here.
We do it sort of in a scale.
Yeah, you kind of have mild, but that's actually the cherry. So you've got light to dark here on a scale. So just take us through, what does that mean? Light, medium, and dark. And
what's funny is, there's light, medium, and dark in the grocery store, and then there's light, medium, dark at more coffee roasters. Everything is going to be shifted into the lighter spectrum because we are Nordic coffee roasters and we want to showcase the quality of that coffee. So when we say light roast, it's much lighter than, unless you've been in this game or you've experienced specialty coffee, it's probably something you never had before.
Okay.
And that's where you're going to have the potential for very floral flavors and different exotic fruit flavors, most readily available to perceive. And then when we give it that extra development, what we call a medium roast is probably on the lighter side of a medium roast that you're going to get at a grocery store. But this is where there's some fruitiness left, maybe like a heavy cherry flavor, or berries or darker fruit, but more paired with what you get from further caramelization with chocolatey or actual caramel or molasses flavors. Or like nutty flavors. That's going to be in our medium roast window. And then when we get into our dark roast window, it's just taking that caramelization process that much further to get even bigger body and darker chocolate flavors and heavier on the nutty side of
chocolate. I think you're speaking
chocolate
language here.
But that's going to be
So for you guys, that's dark. That's like when you get in the store dark, that's usually like smoky, charred. Right. And that I think and I would agree with you. But I think in your perspective, that's like at that point, you're kind of wrecking the coffee. You're kind of killing the flavor, just kind of going to a charred. I mean, I don't know, maybe some people like that.
Totally.
That's one of the things I never really liked about coffee a whole lot was that.
There's people in my family that love and only eat very, very well done steak. And I can't stand it.
And there's people that like very well done coffee.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, totally.
That's why people generally and historically have put additives into their mug of coffees, because for the longest time that was the only way to roast. There wasn't enough technology to.
Machines like this are relatively new when it comes to developing and roasting and consuming coffee. For sure.
So you can do a little bit of this. So I used to do this at home, and I would go for a medium roast just because I didn't like the burnt flavor. And so you could kind of control it at home. If you guys have ever tried this, there's different ways to do it, like cast iron, Dutch oven. skillet, but you roast and kind of just take it towards that first crack. Listen, that's what we do. Keep it moving.
Yeah.
And then just kind of find, where I liked it after that, essentially. It was all art and probably not good art, honestly, but I came up with an okay product. It wasn't very consistent.
Was it more visual color, or was it more like time-wise?
It was more, I played with time, but it was a lot of visual, and then I would try to keep track of time, but it wasn't really good. I got little kids running around and, the cow getting out and different things going on.
Yeah.
And so we did pretty good. I was just happy that I had a green bean. I knew it was clean.
Yep.
And I could get something I liked that wasn't burnt and smoky, well done, as you put it. And so that was a nice control, but it was very hard to be consistent. It was actually took up a fair amount of time.
Yeah.
To get it done.
That is the challenge.
And so but that's how people have done it for hundreds, thousands of years. Some sort of roasting and some sort of metal pan, I think.
Or iron.
Yeah. So, I love getting to blend technology with, you could say coffee roasting actually is a traditional skill, an old skill. Do you know the old cowboys? I didn't realize this. Coming across the country, the chuck wagons all they had was green beans. That was all they had, and there was a coffee grinder mounted to the side of every chuck wagon. Yeah,
coffee.
You're right. Cowboy coffee. Cowboy and coffee is ubiquitous.
Yeah.
And that's because the cook, whatever they called him, he had to know how to make good coffee. But they ground it fresh and roasted it in some sort of cast iron.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah,
coffee's pretty Americana.
Yeah.
It's been in our roots for a long time.
Yeah, it really has. But, now we've got the technology like this machine, which, by the way, is made in North Idaho.
It is.
Diedrich's. This is a cool machine. I love it that we've got our own, coffee roasting manufacturer here.
Tell them about our time at the factory.
It was so cool. It was so cool. Okay, so when we placed the order in on this, we talked to them and we said, hey, we have more of an accelerated time schedule. Do you have anything that's already been production on the floor? And they said, yeah, actually, we have one that might be available. Let me check with you. Yes. Do you want it? We said, yes. Can we come see it? And they said, sure, come on over. So we got to be able to tour the factory, and we got to see this one being produced. It was still in production. And while we were there, we got to see machines of all sizes.
Yeah. They've got is it a 2-pounder?
Yeah, they got a small
I want one day. That's my I hope. Yeah.
They even have one like in the lobby where it's like the smallest one they've ever made.
Okay.
And it's very, very tiny. You remember that one?
It's not, I don't think it's in production anymore.
No, they took
it's like
it
a
out.
trophy.
Was it like a 1-pounder or a half?
I think so.
It was like this big.
That
Yeah.
Not all.
Wow.
And then we saw other ones that were huge, would fill literally the size of what your viewers can see right now. This whole production zone.
And bigger.
And bigger. And we asked the guy, said, what's this for? He says, turning green beans brown. Oh, that's it. And I said, well, good thing that we're getting the size that we want. That way we can actually have a machine that's capable of focusing on that roast to get all those nuanced flavors, and to also, as Nick was saying earlier, being able to sort of fine tune the roast.
Yeah.
A lot harder to do on a larger scale, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that factory tour was awesome. And then at the very end, we kind of like turned around and saw their whole stock of everything that they had. And they had machines going to Poland and South Korea and all over Germany and whatnot. And we're like, wow, well, this one's only going down the street. So that's awesome.
World-class machine, made just down the street, about 30 minutes south. Yeah. And that was one of the factors, not the only factor. It was finding a quality machine, but the fact that we could buy a machine that's built in America was important to us. And then a machine that was built in North Idaho, God's country.
I was like,
okay,
stamp of sweetness.
We got to do this. And so we were super pumped to get it. And it's been an excellent machine.
Yeah.
We have modified it a little bit so to make sure that we can roast even more fine-tuned with how.
Sound like a true homesteader DIYer. Got to tweak it and make it your own, right? Yeah.
It's a lot of fun because we have the gentleman that actually did all of the not the roasting, forgive me, all of the welding on the inside of the cylinder.
Okay.
He comes into the cafe all the time.
Oh, wow.
And he's like, I remember this exact one. His hands were in this machine.
Oh, that's fun. Cool. Well, that gives a little bit of story. A little segue. Why lore? Just because you're talking story. So tell us about lore for a second, and we'll come back around to the next step which is brewing the coffee. But Lore's your brand, right?
Me or you?
I don't know. It goes both ways. Why don't you start it? And then, you know, it's part of our family, and it's what we've been doing
Yeah, for sure.
for 2.5 years. So I think we both have different perspectives on it, or just like it's unique.
Did you co-brand it? Did you already have, as the roaster,
No.
already have
No. I knew I wanted to roast
It
coffee.
It took months to pick a name.
Yeah.
It's hard. I've started a few businesses, and branding,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing something like what you guys are doing,
Oh, yeah.
and you're particular about everything you do and doing well. It's hard to come up with a
Absolutely.
concept.
We have to be forward thinking. We have to be thinking about how people might be looking at our brand later on as we develop and mature and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's why we chose lore, because lore fully encompasses, like, it encompasses, but it doesn't. What it means is like history or tradition behind something,
Or story.
or stories, that sort of thing. And that's what we like to do with all of our coffees anyway. So it's really short and sweet. Lore Coffee Roasters. What we want to do is bring you into the story behind each and every of these roasts and selections and sources, and get to know more about the farmers and the whole region. And it's so cool because the world is so different when it comes to even just all the coffee growing zones, how those communities handle it. Like you were saying, everyone would get it from their small little homesteads in some areas of the world. And then they'd all bring it down into everyone has a stake in a co-op to own a mill, so that way they can produce their coffee together.
Right.
That sort of a thing. That's really, really cool. And then there are other people who own a mill by themselves on their own farm, which those are different unique situations, and getting to know the history behind it. There's another gentleman that we've been working with for a coffee that's coming up that's, third generation. And then there's another one who's, like 11th generation, of someone we've actually sampled in the past. And that's so much rich history behind it. So that's one of the reasons why we chose lore.
I hope you guys will get to the point where, and I mean, I know startup, I know you guys are in it a couple of years, but you're still getting things going. I hope you'll get to the point where you're able to tell these stories, like on your website, in a blog or, podcast like this or something, and tell the stories. I think people love hearing that thread.
We intend to do it. Absolutely. Yeah. We're already building a coffee archive of everything we've already had and where it all comes from and everything like that.
What's cool is with lore is that one word encompasses our whole philosophy of when it comes down to it, which is sourcing and roasting coffee. We want that process from start to finish, when it's being brewed and consumed, is you're getting to know the coffee on a deeper level. Yeah. The lore is something deep and true, and it's experience.
Yeah. Well, we're coming back around to that today. People in general are tired of the industrial mega system that you have no connection to, that doesn't care about anything. Yeah. I mean, everybody in business needs to make a profit. We understand that, right?
Sure.
But you get business that don't care anything but that. And it's just not relatable. And these things, I mean, like 11th generation of, I want to know that story. I want to know about that. I want to know, that's quite a heritage to pass along.
It totally is.
Covering a large span of time. So short, quick, what's the story behind the cup we're drinking right here?
Good question. Well, this is actually,
put you on the spot.
Yeah, on the spot. It's a half calf. So it's half of a caffeinated or a regular coffee, and then another of a Swiss water processed decaffeinated coffee. And the decaf is from Mexico, and the caffeinated one sounds strange saying the caffeinated one. It's a regular coffee. That's from a Costa Rican that we really like.
Yeah, the Costa Rica, this coffee from Costa Rica, it's a grand pea berry. It's which means that I have to get into detail again. It's and it's real short. And a cherry, there's normally two halves of two C's that butt up against each other. There's a flat side and a round side. But with a pea berry, there's just one, and it's just circular or like an oval.
Wow. Okay.
So that's what we have with this coffee from Costa Rica. But we love this coffee. It encompasses everything we want in a coffee that we think everyone will enjoy, no matter how we roast it. But especially when we go in that medium to darker window,
it behaves really well. When we roast it. We've had no complaints with it. Sounds strange saying that, but handling that bean in the machine is it's never thrown us thrown us way off or anything like that.
And
It's
then in
always been
terms of
consistent.
the decaf half side of this blend, we worked really intimately with one of our suppliers. They gave us a very large list of coffees that were Swiss water processed and organic, and we narrowed it down our hopeful sample list to, I think it was 5 or 6 based off of the characteristics they had listed in our discussions. And then we sample roasted them and we picked the winner blind. We didn't know,
And we kept trying again and kept picking the same one again and again and again. We said, okay, this is going to be the one that we want to focus on.
And then we tried it paired with this Costa Rican coffee that we already had on the floor, and it just tasted incredible. So we knew that was the perfect, synthesis.
Cool. So fun. Well, I look forward to that side. Right now, you guys are doing amazing at coffee. Let's talk about brewing. That's the next.
Oh yeah.
That's the third leg, right? We were talking about the third phase is to get that good coffee to the point to get it to your palate is brewing. And of course, we can't cover all the we're talking about coffee, and by coffee, we're talking about some good drip coffee. It could be pour over. It could be espresso.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's all kinds of cold press. I guess maybe that's what we're getting a little fringe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But so what are just some principles, and maybe we can cover drip and espresso or something. Those are kind of the two main. What are some
French
principles?
press would be a good one as well.
Yeah, French press.
A lot of people
right?
at home are using French press.
Yeah. So what are some principles for we've invested in sourcing it well, invested in good roasting. What are some principles in making sure that you brew your coffee to take advantage of all the work that's gone into it?
I'm really glad you asked that question. As Nicholas kind of hinted at earlier, is that coffee's made 3 times. It's grown and then it's shipped to us and then we roast it. Then also now you have a roasted bean. You can't, I guess you could just eat it, but you wouldn't. You'd actually want to drink it.
You got to wrap it in chocolate if you do that.
Yeah, seriously. So that third part is just as important to get right, just as important as us roasting it correctly, just as important as how it's sourced and grown correctly. So the best way
to brew coffee is with a scale. You need to have a scale.
Kitchen scale.
Right, I'm getting technical, but everybody here ought to have a kitchen scale.
Right, you're making sourdough at your house, or whatever you're doing, canning. I don't know. My wife is in the kitchen all day long, and she uses a kitchen scale that we also use to brew coffee in the morning. And you don't have to use a scale to make good coffee, but it's the way you can be the most precise and consistent. And it's really easy. You can spend $15 to $50 online, grab a scale that measures into grams to half grams would be great. And then it's just remembering a ratio.
So this is you're measuring it after you've ground it?
No, measure it
pre-grind.
Pre-grind.
Okay.
Because you're going to lose a little bit of weight in your grind, whether it be a half gram or a whole gram. And so maybe if you wanted to put 20 grams into a cup to brew, weigh out 20 and a half, grind that, and then you should have 20 grams left over to play with.
So give us a quick recipe then.
Sure.
Weight of coffee to ratio of water, I guess, is where we're going, right?
Yep.
So just starting point. I mean, I realize people can probably play with it and get wherever they want to go, but what's a go-to
for drip or French press or pour overs? I prefer a 1:16 ratio of coffee to water every gram
in weight.
In weight. It's really hard to do that without weighing the coffee because each bean, the different shapes, you're eyeballing it, volumetrically.
That's key.
It's really hard to be consistent without a scale. But a 1:16 ratio for any of those brew methods, drip, French press, or pour over.
So you can get to where you weigh your coffee every time, but then however many cups you're making, 8 cups in a drip or something, how much that weighs. So therefore, how much bean you need to weigh out.
Like say you wanted to brew you had a drip machine at your house or a really big French press.
Yeah.
When you had 4 people that wanted to drink, you're going to look at a nice 10 to 12 ounce cup of coffee. You're going to want 20 to 25 grams per cup. So you're looking at 100 grams ish, 80 to 100 grams of coffee in.
Okay.
And about 1,200 grams of water going in as well. And then the result will be fully extracted. And delicious cup.
We'll of course there's going to be a blog post that goes with this, so we'll get you at least the starting point.
Yeah.
You can play with it and probably adjust to your taste, but we'll get that written
Yeah.
out for you so you don't have to remember.
That's the
here.
best way to do it, is try it off of just like a bland, kind of almost a faceless recipe.
Yeah.
And say, I want it weaker, I want it stronger, and then just make it yours.
Yeah.
We love that.
Very, very cool. Okay, so we're talking drip, French press, pour over, espresso.
Oh,
That's getting a little more complicated
It is,
because
yeah.
you're not really measuring the water coming through
right.
the machine, or at least that would be, you got time. Anyways, you get time pressure.
Mhm.
So I don't know how deeply we want to go into this, but
We can take a few minutes.
yeah, but probably just not too deep, not too technical.
Sure.
If people want it, we'll do it we'll come do a how-to and get into the technical of brewing. That could be fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys tell
Oh,
us.
yeah.
Would that be helpful? Would that be cool? We could actually come into the coffee shop and geek out a little bit. That'd be fun for me.
That would be a lot
You
of
We'll
know.
do a deep dive with.
Yeah, but just as a general principle
Yeah.
for espresso.
You want, and once again, you're going to want to at least weigh how much coffee you're putting in.
Mm-hmm.
And then we recommend, at least while you're getting a feel for it, to weigh how much espresso comes out. You're going to want at least a 1-to-2 ratio for a double shot of espresso. So
So if you've got a double shot, what do you call it?
Portafilter.
Portafilter, and you're doing a double shot.
Yeah.
What's the weight of coffee that should go?
Depends
into
on how big your basket is.
Mhm.
But
they're different. I thought that was like standardized, like portafilters.
it's sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah. You
They're all
it's
in a
also
really
listed.
similar range. Yeah.
If you list it
What he
on the
wants to
bottom-
say is it depends.
Yeah.
That's a kind of a joke within the
Uh,
for me permaculture within the pantry chat.
It
It depends.
But
It does.
espresso theory is so rich and deep, and you could go there forever.
It can be complicated, but
Yeah.
basics, for a double shot, I'm shooting for around 18 grams of coffee in
okay.
and 36 to 50 grams out.
Out.
Yep.
I was at a coffee shop somewhere, and it was the first time I've seen it. They were actually had a scale, and they were weighing the shot as it was being poured.
Yep.
This was Carolyn. We were up in Canada.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We
for-
do that.
for her birthday here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And so they were. So now I know exactly what they were doing. I
Yep.
was like, oh, that's interesting. I'm not seeing anybody.
Here's the other part that we
Do that.
forgot when it comes to other brewing, but it's applicable here too. Not only were they weighing how much coffee came out, they were timing it. They wanted
Mhm.
how long did it take.
You're right. That actually that's like a special scale,
Yeah.
wasn't it? Because I feel like it had
Yeah.
a clock on it
It does.
and a weight. So that's a particular scale.
Yep.
We'll see if we can find one for you in case you do want to geek out, and we'll try to resource it down below.
You can get that 1-to-2 ratio, but if it takes 10 seconds, it's going to taste really sour and awful. If it takes a minute, it's going to taste really bitter and also awful.
20, 30 seconds.
20 to 35 seconds. Tighten it up. I'd say 25 to 35
is
seconds.
the ideal.
It's going to be ideal depending on what roast level the coffee
Okay.
was, and
Right.
its characteristics.
And one of the easiest ways to tighten it up would be, or extend it, would be change the size of the granules you're putting in.
Grind setting
Yeah.
is very important with espresso. It's important for every brew method, but especially espresso. We have espresso grinders in our shop that we only use for brewing espresso, and it's going to need to be really fine, and we need to be able to make minute or very tiny adjustments.
I'm going to be in trouble when I get home because I'm going to change the whole process.
Yeah.
I can geek out on this stuff when I got something I love and I've got time. That's the hard part is time.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, this sounds fun. One thing we didn't talk about that I know is a factor and has got to be important, and that is grinding.
Yeah.
So you're talking about weighing the whole beans. You can just weigh it before you grind it.
Yeah.
A lot of the home setups, though, you kind of got a bin. The beans are all in the bin, and you're going to grind. So I think what you're suggesting is don't store your beans in the grinder. Weigh them,
Yeah.
then grind them. But what do we need to know about grinding? Drip, French press, espresso. They're different.
Here's a
grinds.
rule
Yeah,
of thumb:
sure.
the smaller the cup of coffee you're brewing, the smaller the grind setting should be. The grind should be smaller. So whether that is drip,
Mhm.
if you're brewing like a tiny cup, 6 ounces, the grind setting should be a lot finer than if I was brewing for 10 people.
Okay.
And the same thing for espresso. So it's a small little cup, so it's going to need to be really fine for there to be, it really comes down to partially caffeine content.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, one of the main reasons why people drink coffee is the caffeine.
So the finer it's ground, or you're extracting,
It allows for the
caffeine?
most extraction. And
Okay.
so when you're brewing espresso, you're looking at 1 to 2.5 ounces of coffee.
Mhm.
And, in Italy, in Europe, you're going, and that's coffee, it's to wake you up too, but it's this little tiny beverage, and you shoot it back, and it's basically the equivalent of drinking a full cup of drip coffee or French press, something like that. So grind setting, the smaller you go, the finer it should be.
Mhm.
And then the more your grinder will allow for changing, the higher quality the grinder is. I recommend flat burrs.
Okay.
Burr grinders, not blade. And then we love flat burrs, but conical is really good as well.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I knew a burr versus blade. I didn't know about flat burr versus. Most of them are conical, aren't they?
Yes.
The ones I've had to take apart at home because they need to be cleaned out or
Yep.
something have
Yeah.
always been conical.
Me at my house, I have a lot of people do this. I just have a hand grinder,
Mhm.
and what I spent most of my money on was the quality of the burrs on the inside, which is a conical one.
Hand grinder. So you put in your weighted beans.
Yeah, so I'll just put it on the scale and just tear it out without the cap on, and then I just put the bag over it, and I just go ahead and get as many grams of coffee that I want, put the cap back on, and just grind it by hand. And it's really nice because I get to grind it fresh right in front of me.
Oh, I like
smell
that.
it every
That's
day.
fun. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
That's if you want to do the manual route. A lot of people will go with the automatic, and there's kind of a step in between with the burr grinder that's stationary, that's an electric,
Mhm.
and then a burr grinder that's, I guess, a manual. There's those blade grinders in between. The blades, it will grind the coffee. It'll change it into different sizes, but there'll be such a variation in the sizes.
Mhm.
You'll have some that are very small, some that are very big. And so if you're going for a specific type of a brewing method, you're going to want uniformity in those grinders.
Right.
So that's kind of why there's a little bit of distance in between. But if you're going to go at your house, just like me, even though I own an entire coffee company, I do have a manual grinder at home,
Yeah.
just because I'm making one small cup of coffee and it's intentional, or I'm making another one for a guest.
Yeah. Cool. All right. There you go. We've covered a lot here. We're talking sourcing coffee, roasting coffee, brewing coffee, which when we came into this conversation was like, those are the pillars of getting a good cup of coffee. What I didn't know, and I found out during a little break here while we were getting something to quiet down our cups so the sound didn't bother you guys out there listening, was that there is a way to drink coffee. And I am very, very validated right now. And for those of you that have followed along for a while, I've gotten in trouble on this show multiple times for slurping my coffee too loudly. I just found out that that's allowed. Why is that?
Absolutely.
Slurping coffee is actually required.
Necessary.
It's necessary. It's required to getting the full effect of the coffee you're drinking. When you slurp the coffee, you're spraying the coffee across your tongue and your whole palate. And so it's getting to hit all these different layers of taste buds, which allows you to experience more of the coffee itself.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of flavor compounds in good coffee. So if you want to taste it all, don't just take a big gulp.
Slurp and be noisy.
Slurp it.
Slurp and be noisy.
And if you get in trouble at home, just say, I told him that it was okay.
I think the problem is usually when we're recording, I have a little mic right here. Right. And so it's right there. And
Okay,
I think it's loud, understandably
makes
so.
sense.
But so it's to poke fun at everybody because it probably needs to be quiet. But I didn't know I was doing a good thing.
That's really
I
fun.
was just taking in the flavor.
It's perfect.
Yeah, good. That's good technique.
So hey, you guys, this has been a fun conversation. I want to share with everybody though, because I want to connect you guys with these guys in Lore Coffee, and we've done something fun. They have created a roast actually for Carolyn and I. We were having to order online and have gone through a lot of effort to find a coffee we love. These guys have made one, and it's actually a co-branded Lore and Homesteading family coffee. Not that you have to get this one, but it might be a good starting place.
Yeah.
Because Carolyn and I are we're middle of the road. We're probably not as exotic as maybe what you guys like in the specialty. But we like good solid coffee. And this is a chocolate pecan and mild cherry from Central and South America. Any story behind this before we go? Short story? I mean, besides that you
Yeah.
kind of created this at our request.
It's exactly what we described earlier. It's what
Okay.
we've been drinking. It's
Yeah.
it's that half calf blend of the Swiss water Mexican decaf
Okay.
coffee from Mexico.
Mhm.
That's really bold and full of heavy body and chocolate.
Good chocolate flavor.
with a little cherry undertone and some nuttiness. And it's paired with that Costa Rican coffee that
Cool.
it's just a universal coffee that we love. And when you put it together, it's an excellent coffee that doesn't over caffeinate you.
Yep.
Some you can drink,
It's half
All day long,
All
every
day long.
hour, no problem. It just,
Yeah.
The coolest thing about the coffee, I think, for this project and for your viewers and your audience is that this is one of the, it's gone through the testing that we
Yep.
want
Yeah.
to do, and we want to make sure that people who are also on their own health journey can feel comfortable drinking.
yeah. So this is certified. It's grown organically. I don't know that it's all certified. I mean, I see you do have some certified, but
Yeah.
Some
but you guys
coffee-
are sourcing, and it's kind of just like when we're sourcing food locally, right? I mean, organic label, that's a conversation we could have all day long.
That's
You want to
cool.
know your source is what you want to do. These guys are sourcing good coffee. They're sourcing organically grown coffee, whether it's labeled perfectly or not. It's tested for mycotoxins, mold and yeast, and glyphosate. It's all free. And so we've got that here. That was certainly at our request. And so I want you guys to check this out. If you love good coffee and you want some healthy coffee, reach out to these guys. We'll get you some info down below, and you can go check out Lore Roasters, LOREROASTERS.com, loreroasters.com. And then I think you guys have a special for our listeners and our subscribers.
Yeah, absolutely. 10% off
Mm-hmm.
your next bag of coffee. Doesn't have to be right now, but if you want to order
Cool.
from us in the future, anything like that.
10% off. Very good.
10% off. Just put your email in. There'll be a pop-up. If you throw that in there, you'll be able to get 10% off. And we're going to have a landing page by the time this is viewed. And the landing page probably going to be what? loreroasters.com/
Homesteading family.
homesteading family.
We can do that, right?
Let's go 15 for sure.
Yeah. Okay. There you
Yeah.
go. Okay. Homestead 15.
Homestead 15.
Homestead 15.
We better write this down.
Yes, we do.
Anyways, Homestead 15. Your first batch, first bag. Check it out. We've been drinking their coffee for several months now. Love it. And man, this has been fun, you guys, and been fun to hang with you. Thanks so much for just educating us all, and thanks for bringing your passion to North Idaho and to the world, honestly. So we get to flip.
All right.
There you go. Love it. Been great hanging out with everybody, and we'll see you next time.